right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Satya Constantine, and I am the Executive Director of Vote Solar. We are a 501c3 organization working towards a 100% clean energy future through a solutions-driven, people-first approach. And it is my great honor today to welcome you to Vote Solar's virtual fireside chat, a sunset, not a fire behind me here, to recognize the remarkable work being done by this year's Energy Justice Award finalists in their communities, and to celebrate the legacy of Dr. Espinola Jackson, an inspirational leader in the environmental justice movement. For over 40 years, Dr. Jackson dedicated herself to improving the health, economic opportunity, and environmental well-being of the Bayview Hunters Point neighborhood here in the Bay Area and San Francisco. She was a passionate fighter for environmental justice, clean energy access, and a just transition to a renewable energy economy. Jackson's drive stemmed from her core belief that all people should have equitable access to a safe and healthy environment. Beginning in the 1960s, Dr. Jackson began organizing residents in Bayview's public housing projects to demand improved living conditions and housing protections. Dr. Jackson went on to lead high-profile environmental justice campaigns against poisonous facilities being sited in her community, and one of the largest battles she ever fought was to clean up the Hunters Point shipyard, an extremely toxic retired military base. She pushed for a ballot proposition to postpone housing development at the shipyard until all the toxic and radioactive pollution was gone. And through all of this, through her work as a community organizer and her presence at City Hall, Jackson was also a mother to 6 children, definition of a good community activist. Later in life, Dr. Jackson became a passionate advocate for making rooftop solar accessible to low-income households. She saw, as we do, solar energy as a clean solution to improve health and economic opportunity in her community of Bayview. Until she passed in 2016, she continued showing up and speaking out relentlessly for her community. Now, that's right around when I joined Vote Solar, so I didn't get to work with Dr. Jackson, but my predecessor did. And he and Vote Solar were so impressed that in 2017, to celebrate the life and activism of Dr. Jackson, Vote Solar created the Solar Justice Award, now called the Energy Justice Award. The criteria for the award are modeled after her legacy in clean energy workforce development, coalition building, and grassroots organizing for community justice. Our past awardees have reflected Dr. Jackson's work within their own communities, and you can read more about the former awardees on our website at votesolar.org, and I really encourage you to do so. Last year's winner, Charles Calloway, the Director of Workforce Development for We Act for Environmental Justice, based in New York, is an incredible example of leaders making an impact like Dr. Jackson. Charles was chosen for his long history of leading empowerment programs throughout Harlem. And as part of his award, we created a video highlighting his work, and we'll show that at the end. As you will see in the video, Charles is such a powerful force in Harlem, and that was further evidenced by the 300 votes he received from members of the public. And he was part of the first group of nominees to be selected for the award via a public vote. Prior to 2022, the awardee for the EJA award here was chosen solely by the selection committee. However, we wanted to be consistent to include more people in the process and expand the reach of our finalists across the country. Reflecting the kind of virtuous cycle that will be part of a just clean energy future, Charles now serves on the award selection committee, helping to choose our 3 finalists from the 30+ incredible nominations we received this year. And kudos to all of you out there who helped get those nominations in. But now, what you really want to do, let's meet the finalists. So I think you can see everyone on the screen here. One of our 2023 finalists is Cherie Brooks, President and visionary co-founder of the Power 52 Foundation based in Baltimore, Maryland. Cherie works to bring clean energy access and economic empowerment to historically marginalized communities, and her work is far-reaching and includes the development of the Power 52 Energy Institute, which is the first clean energy career training program in Maryland. She also began something called the Powerhouse Resiliency Hub. This provides emergency support services in an East Baltimore community, and as we all know, resilience in the face of the impacts of climate change is really, really an important aspect of this transition. Our next finalist is Esperanza Vielma, or ESPI, Executive Director of the Environmental Justice Coalition for Water. She has dedicated her career to serving underrepresented communities, and ESPI led efforts to establish the first Disadvantaged Community Task Force for San Joaquin County, Cafe Co-op, the first incubator in the county to serve marginalized communities, and the Coalition for Equity and Economics, a statewide environmental justice coalition. Every day, ESPI continues to advocate tirelessly for clean energy and water access. We know these things are tied together. Our third finalist is Yesenia Rivera, Executive Director of Energy Allies based in Washington, D.C. For Yesenia, energy and environmental justice are personal. She grew up in Puerto Rico and felt the impact of energy burdens and insecurity. Yesenia is a lifelong community organizer working to eliminate the barriers to clean energy in under-resourced communities. And from her early days organizing tenants in DC to her current work at Energy Allies, leading community solar projects and so much more, Yesenia has remained committed to energy justice. Now, I know you don't want to hear from me. We're all excited to hear from these exceptional panelists. But first, let me just take care of a few housekeeping events items for this event. First, you all should know the event is being recorded. This recording will be made available on our website following the event, and we have allocated time for Q&A at the end. So please, if you have any questions, submit them through the chat box, and we will try to get them up as they come in. Now, let's start. Cherie, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us more about your work and what led you to the EJ space. And then you can just hand it over to the other panelists as each of us are ready to come up. And please take it away, Cherie.
Okay, thank you, Sachu. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to be here. Just a tad bit nervous. You know, I spoke to the team yesterday, and so I think this is what made me most nervous is that, you know, I talk about the work all the time, but I was told to talk about myself for 10 minutes. But thank you so much for having us here. Listen, congratulations to the other finalists, Yesenia and Esperanza. Like, I'm so excited to see people who look like me here and definitely represented. And the first thing that I said when I saw who was on here and where you guys were located is just, hey, we have to partner. How do we partner? It's all about that. So definitely I want to get, you know, with you guys after this is all said and done so that we can work together to do more work to have a greater impact. So just jumping into who am I? Who is Cherie Brooks? Definitely first and foremost, if I had to, you know, pick one word to describe me or the things that I like to do is, I would say service. I'm a servant. Okay. And I mean that in so many different prospects of the word. When I was small, I used to always say, you know, can we go and pick this person up? Can we go and pick that person up? And my aunt would say, what about your own business? Because I'm always trying to make sure everyone has the things that they need. And so I could never understand why I was always trying to advocate and do things for other people. And then as I got older, I said, you know, this is just ingrained in who I am. And so, you know, I just kind of roll with it. I'm a mother. Definitely, we all know being a mother, you're a servant there. I have four beautiful babies. Definitely, I helped to raise my nephew, and he is 25. And then I have a 17-year-old daughter, Amira. She's the princess. And then I have two other sons. One Zion, and then Michael. Zion's 15, and then Michael's 12. So I'm a servant there. Also, I was raised in the Pentecostal church, and I serve on the official board. I'm official board. I am the chair of the media department. And so this church was built by my grandfather. So I like to say I am a PK, a preacher's kid. And so I was raised in, I served in this community in West Baltimore, where we would, again, serve the community. And at the time, I'm just thinking we're going to church and doing what every other person does. But afterwards, I found out not so much. So I'm a servant there. I'm also a member of Alpha Nu Omega Sorority Incorporated, where I have held positions there, and this is a Christian sorority. So we go out into the communities. One of our thrusts there is mental health. And so again, just something else in my life that I, am a servant. And my work history involves real estate. So I always did real estate. I never wanted to do real estate, but my background is in solar. No, not, I always say solar, but it's cellular. I spent many years building a cellular network that we all talk on. And so from there, I was able to become a project manager. And, I have built several sites from we like to say cradle to grave, but doing rooftop co-locations and new site builds for many Fortune 500 companies that we all, serve as our carriers. So I have done that work, and then I did real estate as a result of being laid off after working in the cellular community for so long. But after 9/11 hit, it impacted a lot of jobs. And so from there, I became a realtor. And I feel like being a realtor, I was married to the first time home buyers. People will always say, well, you want to do sales. It's easier to do sales because you just list the house and then everybody else will go and sell them and you make money that way. But for some reason, again, I found that it was more so a ministry for me, being married to the first time home buyers, because this is, again, one of the biggest purchases that people would have and make in their lifetime. And I didn't realize why that was so daring to me. Again, it would just happen, me being a servant, it would just happen. It's nothing that was prearranged or anything that I, thought through. But first time home buyers were near and dear to me because I could walk them through the process, help them clear up any challenges, and made sure that they would definitely have, complete this purchase that they could then, use as a resource to their children. And so with that, again, this all has led me to the work of Power 52. And so I told the Vote Solar team, I could talk about Power 52 all day long. It's so hard for me to talk about myself. And so at any rate, with this, my family, how I even got into, doing this type of work, my family, they were solar developers. And so I knew about, renewable energy and, from them doing the work. But I said to myself, there has to be more to this. They always told me when they would go to the conventions how unrepresented that they were and how they, stuck out being African Americans. There were not a lot of diversity in the sector. Okay, so then we had the riots in Baltimore City. So I remember, just sitting in my family room with my little ones at the time, looking at the TV and saw that, the city was being destroyed. And I said, we need to do something about this. How do we take what we're doing here in the family business and give this opportunity to the individuals who, really were, in need of, some transformative, a transformation. And so with that, basically Power 52 was birthed. My husband at the time said, what are you doing on Monday? And I said, I'm going to do a solar summit. And so he's like, what's a solar summit? And so I knew I wanted to get the word out to, I guess nonprofits, but I thought at the time, maybe it would be hospitals, churches, and, organizations like that. Um, and so I started spreading the word. Well, this brought about more money for the organization than the impact that I wanted to have. And so I'm not going to tell the whole story, but I want you guys to look at a video, and definitely this helps to illustrate what I was feeling at the time and how things got started. So if you guys would mind rolling the video, that'd be great. See here today.
A lot of people build businesses. We built the infrastructure to actually build people.
Power 52 is multifaceted. The first clean energy private career school in the state of Maryland, and we were only the one of two nonprofit organizations to ever receive approval from the Maryland Higher Education Commission to own and operate a private career school. So we are very proud of those things.
It's a myriad of different issues that need to be tackled in order for Baltimore to get better, in order for other urban cities to get better, so we can be the change that not only Baltimore needs, not only Maryland needs, but the whole world needs right now. Power 52 is one of a kind. It really is, to just really encourage the community and upbuild the community, not just in one aspect, but several different areas.
I can tell you that everyone at Power 52, we consider ourselves a family. And when you come through Power 52, it's not that you just get a craft, you now become part of our family.
It's just the culture that we've built here at Power 52 that we want to be real, we want to be inviting. I was born in Baltimore City. I had struggles in my life, and so now I want to be able to empower those, as many individuals or as many girls who look like me that I can.
Can you imagine what will happen if we actually change this city around?
Your support makes this possible.
When you support Power 52, you're not just equipping a classroom. You're empowering lives. We're changing lives, and we're here for it.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much. So definitely that just gives just a little spark of who we are and what we're doing here at Power 52. Thank you for giving me this time to uncomfortably talk about myself. And next I want to pass it on to Esperanza or Espy.
Thank you, Sherry. And that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. So again, my name is Esperanza Bielma, and I go by Espy, and I am in the city of Stockton, California. And my journey begins, I think, as the granddaughter of a bracero who set up his home in Manteca, California. And he started helping his fellow braceros by forming a community type of labor camp. And so from there, my family's always been in terms of helping others. So that's where I think it stems from. And that being said, that led me to be the first generation university graduate of UC Berkeley. So go Bears. And I hail from the city of Stockton. My upbringing is in Southside Stockton. So Southside Stockton is an area which has been growing up, and even more so now, exposed to like the stark realities of pollution. It's an environmental justice community that's been burdened with the airport and trucks and everything that you can think of in an urban setting. That being said, I used to spend my youth and my early years as in high school, trying to be engaged in different types of sports and activities, which are like outdoor activities. So we would run the streets, literally, and we were training for different activities such as track and field. And we would navigate our way through polluted corridors near the airport fly zone, and we lived in Section 8 housing, and we would go past all these like trucks, and the whole thing was like, I guess it was a sense of like unfairness, right? Because our school, we got bused to the other side of town, and on the other side of town, everything was green and lush, and there were levees to run on and what have you. And so this experience is like deeply rooted in my passion for environmental justice and a commitment to make a difference. So that journey began early on, and I was integrated into that component as far as like air and then water, and doing fishing on the delta. And so that activism continued on as I went on to go on to higher education. I went to my local community college. I was engaged there with MECHA, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán, and we did statewide mobilization efforts to help bring awareness to the hazardous pesticides of farm workers that were endured on a daily basis. And we were able to stop the use of some of those deadly chemicals that were used on the farm workers. Some of the women would go in when they sprayed the fields, and they were pregnant at the time, and their children were born with severe defects, without spines, what have you. And so we were able to bring that awareness campaign, and we were able to stop some of those deadly chemicals. And the same thing for our table grapes. What was happening, there was a campaign in addition to that continued on, and all the way through my university years. And we continued to basically bring awareness so that we could stop that, so the consumer would then not have those pesticides and consume them, and then have those dangerous chemicals in our bodies. So this was my early involvement in advocacy, and it laid the foundation for what I didn't know was environmental justice, right? We didn't know what the word was. We just knew where we lived, what our circumstances were, and they continue, unfortunately, to be there. So people think of California being clean energy and sunshine state and everything else, but in reality, we have these heavy burdens where in San Joaquin County, where Stockton is located, it is one of the catchment areas that UC Davis Cancer Research Center has looked at these different areas throughout the United States, and there are over 12 counties in California, one of which is San Joaquin County, and those counties have a higher percentage of certain types of cancer than the rest of the United States. So they're trying to see what is the correlation of the environmental factors that go into, these different types of cancer that our community members are suffering from. So we this is part of like the health component and the mission that has to do with what the work that we're doing. The organization that I'm representing is Environmental Justice Coalition for Water, and we work in collaboration and formed and found the need to form the Coalition for Environmental Equity and Economics. And the organization is centered around community power building, environmental and economic justice, social equity, and energy democracy. So we're dedicated to advancing environmental justice in California. Our mission is to create a just and sustainable future where all communities, regardless of their race or socioeconomic status, have access to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. So we envision this world to be where environmental injustices are dismantled and the burdens of pollution are not disproportionately borne onto our disadvantaged communities. And so how can we do this? Of course, solar being access to clean energy and not being dependent on the grid is one of the most immediate ways that we can impact our communities. So this is, how work, in terms of the formation of getting to the point of forming this coalition. I think, back to like Sherry's point is, we have to kind of tell our story, where we're from, and then why it is that we're passionate about being able to, leave some kind of legacy, some kind of work that we've done, I myself don't have children, but I have 7 nieces and nephews, and I want to make sure that they're able to breathe clean air, have access to clean and affordable energy. And so, we're able to do what's necessary. We're able to establish these different coalitions and organizations that will have a long-lasting impact and affect change in our communities to have a healthy environment. So one of the things that we did do, I guess it's like I believe to be impactful, is that once we formed the Coalition for Environmental Equity and Economics, one of the challenges that we had, we joined forces with Pastor Carol of Green the Church and others, and we organized different initiatives throughout the state. But one of the main things that we were trying to get folks to understand, and especially in our EJ communities, was that there was a version of the NEM 3.0 that was put forth by the state of California in front of the CPUC. The CPUC commissioners had put this forth. And so basically you were going to get taxed on solar. So you were going to put solar up and you were going to have a tax burden that was going to be added to that. There's already a barrier for our community members in our EJ communities to have access to solar. And then on top of that, they were going to be burdened with the tax. So then we, rose to the challenge. We did massive statewide organizing throughout California with our environmental justice community leaders. And we helped to organize 10 simultaneous rallies throughout the state of California, writing letters to the governor and meeting with the CPUC commissioners. We also had a huge education rally concert over on the state capitol, all to be able to stop the solar tax. And we were successful in that. We were very successful in stopping that. And so I think, this is what, drives myself, to continue, because even though it might seem as though there's this like massive hurdle that you need to overcome, and you're facing a statewide, commission that from one community member therefore expanded upon to like all our communities, are part of a larger community, environmental justice community. We can make the changes that are necessary and to bring awareness, of that intersection and the reality that we have between like race and environment. And so that being said, that's, where I currently stand as a co-founder and a proud member of the Coalition for Environmental Equity and Economics. But it stems from the fact that this is where I'm from. I grew up in Southside Stockton. I came back to Stockton because I think it's important for us, especially in certain urban settings such as this, that we, don't have that brain drain, and that we're able to come back and be able to serve our community members and, work from our knowledge base of experience. And doing that in this environmental justice component is, what basically compels me to be able to have, a goal in terms of waking up, every day and being able to continue to make advances to our environment, and to be able to assist the current and next generation of our community members. So that's basically my story and where I'm at as far as the EJCW and the Coalition for Environmental Equity and Economics. And we currently do have a campaign that we're working on, which has to do with the fixed rate. And so we will be having some information. I think they're going to post as far as like, what are some of the next steps in order to be able to stop that next tax that they're trying to impose on all Californians, and especially our most burdened Californians. And it's going to be a fixed rate that will be in addition to the current utility bill that they have. So that is that's what we're currently working on. And we hope that you'll be able to join us for that. We're going to have that coming up this Monday. We're going to have some economists that are going to speak the truth about the facts and the figures in order to better inform our community members of what's taking place and what's going to potentially affect their bottom line on an everyday basis should this go through with the California Public Utilities Commissioners. And that's our next stop the tax, the fixed rate, which sounds nice, but it's not. So that's where we're at with our organization. And that being said, I'd like to pass it on to Yesenia Rivera.
Thank you for that, Esperanza. Said, I'm Yesenia Rivera, and I am, like Sachi said, I've been a community organizer for a very long time. I have worked as a tenant rights advocate, as a housing counselor during the foreclosure crisis, and I currently work on energy democracy and energy justice issues. I was born in New York City, but raised in Puerto Rico. And actually, my family has a very long history of migrating between Puerto Rico and the mainland for generations. We have been moving to and from the States in search of a better environment. And in many cases, those moves were caused because of environmental disasters. In the 1980s, my parents made the decision to move us back to Puerto Rico. And it wasn't easy for them, but they not only faced raising 3 little girls in New York City in the 1980s, it was also the fact that I've had asthma since I was 5 years old, and living in a city was really not helping my asthma. So they thought that the move to Puerto Rico could help, cleaner air, better environment. So we moved to Puerto Rico. Then I grew up in Hurricane Alley, watching how every hurricane would come and we would be without power for months. It became totally normal, to pull out a candlelight to do the homework because there was no power. And then I realized that wasn't normal. There were other families around us. There were other neighborhoods around us that didn't have that impact when the power went out or when a hurricane came. They didn't lose power. They were fine. But I lived in a neighborhood that was very poor and surrounded by family, and we would lose power for weeks at a time every time a hurricane hit us. As I was working as a housing counselor, I saw my clients struggle the same way my parents would with their utility bills. Not only were they struggling with their mortgages and falling behind on their mortgages, they were also dealing with extremely high utility bills that effectively evicted them from their homes when they missed a payment. They were paying $500-$600 a month in just energy, not to mention water and gas. And that experience and what I've lived through in Puerto Rico helped me understand the importance of energy justice and how we can address housing justice without addressing both energy and environmental justice. As I was getting ready to transition into working in energy justice, I don't know if it was fate or serendipity. It happened to be around the time that Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. And I can tell you, those were 2 of the hardest weeks of my life. It started with Hurricane Irma. It hit Puerto Rico, but thankfully my parents were okay, but it headed straight into Florida where my grandmother and my aunt was living. They managed to avoid it. Then we had a few days later, Hurricane Harvey, and my youngest sister and her family live in Houston off the Gulf Coast. I spent a day and a half just refreshing the flooding maps because everything around her was flooding, and just praying that she was okay. And just as I'm getting ready to take a breath, Hurricane Maria hits Puerto Rico. And, like I said, I grew up in Puerto Rico. I grew up in Hurricane Alley. We lost our house to a hurricane back in the 90s, Hurricane Georges, but I had never seen that level of destruction that we saw with Hurricane Maria. I couldn't reach my parents for 2 days, and I was one of the lucky ones. I was able to reach my family just 2 days after a hurricane. I had friends that spent months without knowing what happened to their relatives, without being able to reach them, and just seeing these images on TV. Sorry, I still get a little sentimental when I talk about this. It was a very hard time, but it's just more proof that, the environment and the climate, the climate disaster we're having doesn't impact us all the same. There were communities in Puerto Rico that were fine, especially the more affluent neighborhoods. They were able to hold on to power. They were able to have access to clean energy, to clean water. But a lot of my family members, they were without power for months at a time. Like my parents were some of the lucky ones because they had a generator. You know, they were able to use the generator and keep the lights on at night, and help the neighbors power some of their appliances. But we lost over 3,000 folks, and not because of the hurricanes, not because of the winds and the rain, but because of what happened after. There were places in Puerto Rico that did not have power for over 6 months. And in Vieques, which is off the main island, they didn't have power for over a year. And that inability to access clean energy, to have power, to have water, led to many, many deaths that did not have to happen. And again, we cannot address housing justice and systemic racism without addressing energy justice and environmental justice. Over the last 6 years, I've dedicated myself to addressing that energy equity and building upon my experience, not just as a tenant organizer and a housing counselor, but what I lived through with my family, to help others understand that we have to move away from operating in silos. When we're advocating for a bill and we're trying to bring clean energy, or we're trying to have solar be more ready and more accessible, we're constantly pitted against each other. You'll see how they'll try to pit transportation advocates and housing advocates and tenant advocates against solar advocates, because if we actually work together to address systemic oppression, we defeat the system. Unfortunately, they keep pulling us apart and breaking us apart, and we're not going to be able to dismantle the system unless we work together. And reality is, our current energy system is designed to benefit only a few. No one should have to choose between putting food on their table, keeping their lights on, or even keeping their home warm in the winter. I think every child deserves to grow up in a safe, healthy, sustainable environment. And I strive to address energy equity because our energy system should not impact our quality of life. As the executive director of Energy Allies, we work on expanding renewable energy access in climate impacted neighborhoods through community-based projects. We engage extensively with communities to provide essential education, promote active participation, as well as developing clean energy projects by those most affected by climate change. We firmly believe that a just and equitable future can only be achieved by centering communities that bear the burden and the brunt of climate change. Currently, our program focuses on serving environmental justice communities in Massachusetts and New York, particularly with an emphasis on under-resourced and frontline communities that have limited clean energy access and face disproportionate climate burdens. In Massachusetts, we concentrate in particular on the neighborhoods of Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan, who have an energy burden that's 7% compared to the city's median, that is 30%. So it's more than twice what the rest of Boston is paying on their, or has to deal with in terms of energy burden. A lot of factors contribute to this. You have age, very old housing, you have limited state programs or access to programs, you have historic disinvestment in these communities. They have been ignored for decades. You can feel that impact in their utility bills, and they're paying for that. So we're working with a community advisory board that leads the development of these clean energy projects. And that advisory board is comprised of residents and smaller CBOs that work with the communities. And we believe in honoring their time and their dedication to this process by paying for their time as community advisory board members. So whenever we ask them to attend a meeting or attend an event, we make sure that we're paying these advisory board members because we have to respect their time and their dedication. And it's important that they have that incentive to be part of the process. We cannot have a just transition and the communities are excluded from that transition. Last June, right before the Inflation Reduction Act passed, the advisory board made a decision that they wanted to own and develop their own clean energy projects, which was kind of tricky because I was trying to figure out how do we do this without tax equity flip. Thankfully, The IRA was passed a few weeks later, and they have access now to that 30% tax credit, which makes developing the project a lot easier. The reason why they decided to own their own projects and develop their own projects versus working with a for-profit developer was because they see community solar not just as a way of reducing their energy bills, but they want to develop projects that will help create generational wealth for the residents. They want projects that will bring in infrastructure investment, workforce development to their communities, as well as reduce their energy burdens. They're currently in the process of incorporating as a solar cooperative and are developing the very first project by installing solar on the Dorchester Food Co-op. It has been extremely challenging finding a site or sites in Boston. Like I said, very old housing, very limited space. You don't have those big open green spaces. And the advisory board could have chosen to install the solar system somewhere else and bring in the energy to the communities, but that would defeat the purpose of trying to build workforce, of trying to bring investment into the communities. So they're focused on building a portfolio of projects instead of one very large solar farm that can benefit their communities. And just want to thank Vote Solar for the opportunity to tell their stories and tell my family stories. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Is what I want to say. Thank you to all three of you, Cherie, SB, Yesenia. These are powerful stories coming out of a lot of powerful stories that we got from all of our nominees. And I can't thank you all, the three of you, enough for sharing these stories. They are inspirational to me personally, and I dare say to our audience, and certainly to Vote Solar. I want to highlight something that I think was consistent through all of your stories, and that is this sense of intersectionality. The idea that climate justice is housing justice, is labor justice, is environmental justice, is ultimately racial justice and social justice. These things are all tied together. And one of the things that your stories teach me, or reinforce for me, I should say, because this is also where Vote Solar is thinking that our power lies. It teaches me how important it is that no matter how we got here, whether it was through faith or community experience or family experience or direct engagement with the ravages of climate change, we all have something to add to this conversation. And again, I want to thank the three of you for really bringing that out with your own personal experiences and stories. We have lots of questions keyed up, and I will try to get to the questions from the audience as well. Because I am so impressed and awed by your stories, though, I want to start with the host privilege here of asking you, all three of you, a question, just to kind of get us started in answering the question. And I think you've already answered it a little bit in your initial talks here, but we try not to be doomers about this. There is so much that we can do, and you are all bringing some of it up. But Vote Solar wants to be an optimistic voice, to show us what we can do to empower our communities and people. So I want to ask you, what gives you the most hope in your work? And how do you use that hope to overcome what maybe are the hardest challenges that you face? Again, I think you've said some of that, but let me just run through the three of you with that question of what gives you the most hope now, and then we'll start into the questions from the audience. So Cherie, why don't we start with you, and then SB, and then Yesenia, if you could. What gives you the most hope? You're on mute, Cherie. Sorry.
Okay, so, oh my goodness. So this question is loaded for me because I think that my hope comes from a multitude of things. So definitely the birth of, organizations like ours and like Vote Solar. So like the birth of organizations like the Institute for Sustainable Communities, Justice 40 Accelerator, and BOSS, that gives me hope. The leadership appointments of women like Shalonda Baker, who is the director of the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, that gives me hope. A shift in government requiring that diversity and equity and inclusion requirements in their projects that are looking to be funded by the government, that gives me hope. The transformative impact on the lives of the people that we serve gives me so much hope. Like Christian, you know, he attended Power 52 Energy Institute. He was referred to us by the Baltimore City District Court, I want to get this right, re-entry program. Christian would ride his bike 15 miles from Baltimore City to our Ellicott City location just to get to class. You know, that right there is measurable impact. From there, Christian went on to work in the solar field. Now, Christian, he did fall short, but guess what? In his time of need, he contacted Power 52, and we were able to get him the resources that he needed to change his life. And then we were able to place him again. And then from that point forward, he has worked in the renewable energy sector ever since, and also be an example to his son. That gives me hope. This is measurable impact. And so all these things coupled together is definitely, you know, why I do what we do, why my team does what we do. And I always say, because it's not about the power, but empowerment. So that's it.
Thank you. SB, what gives you hope?
Well, besides the fact that it's my given name, Esperanza, hope, I would say that it's the resilience and the determination of our environmental justice communities, like all of our communities, that are inspiring, and that gives me hope every day. And seeing people come together and advocate for their rights and affect positive change is incredibly inspiring. I also find that hope in the growing awareness and the commitment to environmental and energy justice among our young people. Their passion and their dedication is the driving force for change. All the people that we work with, from the youth to our senior promotoras that are out there in the community every day, engaged, and have been, you know, as part of their commitment to their own families and communities, that's what gives me hope. Thanks.
Thank you. And Yesenia, what about you?
I would say is just witnessing the changes in our industry, in our field. When I started working with solar energy and access to solar, I remember one of the very first industry meetings I attended, and I looked around the room. I was coming from being a housing counselor, working with a Latino community in the brown and Black communities in Maryland and DC. My clients look like me, my coworkers look like me. I move over to solar, walk into my very first industry meeting, and I did not see other women, much less women of color, at the table till later on. And just to see how in these past 6 years, we're moving past that, we're fighting for equity and inclusion, not just to have a seat at the table, but have a say in how our systems are changing and what our laws are and how they regulate us. And just seeing that dedication, I think shortly after the unrest caused by George Floyd's death, you can see there was this flip. You know, people started noticing, like, you know what, there is a larger problem, but we can't address that larger problem if we keep picking up little buckets and addressing them one at a time. And that commitment to working together and not just, you know, I'm going to fight for what I believe in and you're going to fight over there for what you believe in, and understanding that we need to start our fighting together to dismantle this system.
All right, thank you. Again, powerful answers here. These are great stories. Let me try to get to some of the questions that the audience has for you, and see if we can explore all this a little bit more. I'm going to start with you, Cherie. Your Power 52 works on the dignity of work and really creating change. What was the scariest part of making the leap to founding Power 52? And what advice would you have for others who want to make a similar leap to create that change in their community?
Oh, the scariest thing. I think, well, I know, and I tell this story often. So, I kind of felt like, my family's in the mix, I want to, jump into the EJ pool of it. Um, and I thought, let me just have a little program. Yeah, I just want to have a program. But it was bigger than that. The biggest and the scariest thing was accepting the call, if you will. And so we were, becoming the first clean energy private career school and being one of two nonprofits to ever own a private career school in the state of Maryland's history. That was very scary. And I felt like, oh my goodness, me being, putting together a school and curriculums and accreditations, it was scary. For me, but then when I started thinking about it, if I want to properly, and guys, forgive me, but I'm spiritual, but if I want to properly serve, the people who I need to be the best, I need to have the most so that I can credential them so that they can have a bigger impact once we place them in this crazy clean, energy sector that we're putting them in, because it's not diverse. So they need to be the boldest, the brightest. They need to have, a lot of credentials. So I need to weight us so that they can be weighted and move forward. So with that, all the credentials that Power 52 Energy Institute has obtained, makes the participant coming through even more credential with, OSHA 10, having an accredited school that they can say that they graduated from, having NCCER credentials, getting CPR, first aid AED. We're a NAPSEP service provider, so they're sitting in-house for the industry credential, so that when they go out here in this sector that may not be so warm to receiving them, they can say, we have, come through Power 52 Energy Institute, who is an accredited organization. They can say we have OSHA 10, CPR, first aid, AED. They can say that my college, my training at Power 52 Institute articulates into college credits. So now I even have college credits. They can then come back to us to get additional credentialing so that they can have, more impact in this field. That was the hardest part, credentials, making sure that we had the resources to empower the communities in which we're serving, because we know that it's not going to be friendly in the sector. And what I didn't want to do, and what I saw that could possibly happen at the forefront of this, I'm not training up a bunch of entry-level workers. So you're not going to have them laboring. They have the skills, they have the credentials to back it up. So hire them and pay them the wages, and then accelerate them into management positions. So for that, if you're asking what's scary, the scary part is definitely not knowing all that I needed to know, but then being resourceful, asking questions, and not being afraid of the assignment, and just making it happen. That's it.
Well, that's certainly a lot, Sheree, and thank you for that. I want to make sure I get some questions for everybody else and from the audience. Yesenia, let me turn to you, and I'm going to ask you a similar question, just because I think it consolidates a number of other questions that are in here. Could you share a story? You've already shared some, but that describes your work and what the stakes were for you as you were really honing in on this issue of energy burden and resilience within a community, kitchen table kinds of issues. Any challenges in addition to what you already shared along the way, and maybe share some of that success with us, and then I'll have a question for SB to finish us off.
Sure. Share a story. I was privileged to work on DC Solar for All, which was one of the very first programs nationwide to prioritize low to moderate income families, and the goal being offer them and enable them to access clean energy at no cost to them. And I worked for Solar United Neighbors at the time, worked on developing the outreach and building a pipeline. And I got to visit just about every neighborhood in the District of Columbia. And I had already seen a lot of the district as a tenant organizer, but going house to house and talking to folks about solar, at the beginning, we had to go out of our way not to say free solar, because the second I said free solar, I would lose people. They would think this is a scam. You're trying to scam me. So we had to explain the program in many different ways without saying free solar. And I assure them that no, I'm not trying to scam you. I'm working with the government. I think one of the ways that really helped was partnering with DC's Office of Aging. They host a lot of activities for senior citizens across the district. And the seniors like it because they know that whoever's at those events, whoever's tabling or participating at those events has been vetted by the district. They know they're not getting scammed. They know they're not getting sold lies. So I was able to talk to a lot of older residents in the city and help them install solar in their houses and help them stay in place and age in place a little longer. And about a year after we had finished rubbing up that program, there was rumbles that the district was looking to cut some of the funding for solar for all and shuffle it somewhere else. We send a notice to our list like, hey, we need you to speak up and make sure that the district does not eliminate solar for all funding. And one of the participants' son emailed me back and said, where do you need me to sign up to speak? Who do I need to speak to? Because what you have done for my family is incredible. It's like my 98-year-old mother does not have to worry about running her air conditioner in the summer because of solar. And I will scream that from the rooftops. So it was nice seeing how, we changed lives. It was one family at a time, but it was having the impact we hoped to. We were helping seniors in the district stay in place a little longer.
I know I would do anything for my grandmother too. So thanks for that. SB, a question for you. I think this is actually self-serving for Vote Solar because we believe in leveraging coalition work like this. But how you work in a breadbasket community, a community that faces all these burdens, but is actually putting food on all the tables of Americans across the country, and bringing that out has to be a task that you face, that we all face together. So how important do you think it is to build coalitions between traditional environmental groups and EJ groups and clean energy groups like Vote Solar?
Well, I think it's extremely important because we, I think this was mentioned before, we're in these different silos, right? So we're an environmental justice silo, and then you have the larger environmental groups. And so I think that one cannot exist without the other. And I think the way that things are going, and we, and I'm sure like the others can attest to that, they've been, tapping on our shoulders because of the fact that they need the environmental justice community perspective to be at the table. Right. So you talked about being like the food basket for, the country and different parts of the world. And so that being said, in order for us, to participate, we need to be invited to that table. And so the environmental justice organizations need to be there with the larger organizations, environmental organizations, so that way together we can then speak for the community members that we represent. Because otherwise it's only going to be one faceted, only one community type is going to be represented. And we're never going to get to the diversity, equity, and inclusion that needs to be in all aspects, not just in environmental, but we're talking about environmental aspects here. It needs to be in everything. Like Yesenia had said, she goes into a room and she was the only woman and woman of color. And so that cannot continue to happen. So like how Sherry has, it has to be green career pathways, policymakers, and all the decision makers that go into creating environmental policy. I mean, we essentially will be ingrained into the current establishment and changing it And making it truly equitable is to include our environmental justice organizations alongside with the environmental groups, but also more importantly is to be at the table with the decision makers, because they are there to represent all the residents, not just one portion thereof, whether they're commissioners or legislators, that they have to have that diversity, inclusion, component with the economics and with our EJ community perspective there. So that's where we need to be at. So thank you for asking that question. And then that being said, I'll do another shameless promotion of our chat that's going to take place on Monday at 12:30, and I think they're going to put the link up for that. We're going to have some economic experts that are going to be speaking the truth about the facts and the figures there. And again, thank you for that question and for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. And we will certainly put those resources up. Thank you to all three of you again. We are out of time for questions. We're running a little bit over, but I can't thank you enough. Those of you on the line here listening to this, but especially the three of you for sharing these stories, for sharing these opportunities, right? This is how we're going to make change, by sharing our knowledge, our experience, by working together. And you all are clearly deserving of being here on the finalist stage. I wish you all good luck, Cherie, SB, Yesenia, for taking all this time. I can't thank you enough, and I can't thank you enough for the work that you've done to get here. For those of you on the line and listening, if you were able to hang on for a few extra minutes, please look out for the public voting period, which will open September 11th, will end on September 22nd. So there's just a short window to put your votes in. Remember, everybody is deserving here. We do want to pick someone, but we're going to work with everybody in this process. You can vote on Twitter, LinkedIn, on our website, and we will announce the winner of I think we're all winners for having you here, but the winner for this year on October 2nd, and we'll put a video to that. If you have time, stay on, watch the video that we did for last year's winner, Charles Calloway. You'll see what it's about. And I would like to say once again, thank you. And I'll just say this concludes our event. Have a great rest of your day, wherever you are. And let's move onward.
I grew up in West Harlem and also grew up in Upper West Side. I believe in my community, love my community. That's why I came back here. Being an organizer here at We Act for close to 15 years or more, I came in here not knowing, being a very novice about environmental justice. But I knew that my skill set would fit well. So I guess I needed, and it's a story that I tell people all the time, I needed a job, right? I was looking for work, something that fit my skill set. I came here as an organizer, understanding that I understood the community, understanding that I always wanted to make sure that those things were good for our community, and understanding environmental justice. I applied for the job and I got it. I've been here for 15 years just doing the work that I'm naturally gifted to do. Getting people together, having them fight for themselves, bringing people and educating people around the importance of the environment. And it's a skill set that God has given me, so I continue to do that work. We trained over 100 people in solar installation, and we got them OSHA cards, we got them site safety training, we got them green construction training, and then we also got them in PB, solar installation training. And by training 100 people, we figured that we were able to get them jobs. We all knew that solar was coming. We all knew that it was important for us to get work in this field. Being at We Act, one of the things that we always want to think about is how we improve our community. How do we get the disadvantaged community to be a part of, for lack of a better word, society, right? We need to make sure that as this solar goes up, that we actually get these jobs. So going through that whole process, we really decided that creating our own business, Solar Uptown Now Services, that was incorporated in 2019. We put our first solar panels on a barn in Croton, New York. I have to give a shout out to Croton Energy, who actually gave us the opportunity. We rose to the occasion. So putting up 14 megawatts of solar in Croton, New York, and Westchester area, in all these different areas with the disadvantaged community just shows that we can actually do this work. Solar Uptown Now was our plan to put solar on top of LMI buildings. That was the key. We knew that having energy justice in our community meant that we had to put solar on buildings that way people can actually reduce their costs. Our first focus was to put them on HDFCs. So we went to Green Workers Cooperative for about 6 months. We got trained on how to run a business and how to work cooperatively. We had to do many things to ensure that we got the business up and running. We had to actually work as a group, understand how we make decisions, understand how we would actually become a minority-owned business. After that, we ended up getting a call from a company called GNS Solar, who needed to put on rooftop solar. They ended up getting 18 people from our community on the job, right, who worked on a regular basis and installed 14 megawatts of solar. So it wasn't the idea that we could not do the work, it was the idea that we didn't get the opportunity. As one thing I realized in this field is that people hire who they know. So a lot of these solar companies didn't hire a single person, but they were more willing to hire a group of people who can actually work together and actually put the solar on top of the roofs. And that's what took place. It's important that we understand that as a unit and building power, we can actually do the work, and gives a lot of confidence. Just want to make sure that my community has a say in what happens in their community. Building power is very important. Educating people is very important, right? Making sure that people are not suffering from asthma is very important. Have good places to live, no lead and mold in their apartments, right? Just because you are a disadvantaged community doesn't mean you should live in squalor, right? Working in the environmental justice field, it allows me to educate the people about different toxins in our products, educate them about asthma, educate them about lead, mold, and get a seat at the table, right? It's very important that we get a seat at the table, because if we do not speak for ourselves, then who's going to speak for us? Nobody. We are fighting for environmental justice. We're also making sure that this environmental justice has some jobs for people in this community.
For just $67,